The General Study of Supplying People with Adequate Quantities of Clean Water by Jared Taylor. So what this study is about is the average daily water use and access to water that people have globally. So as we see here in the US, we use upwards of 600 liters a day, whereas in countries like in Mozambique, it's 10 to 20 liters a day. The problem isn't necessarily the quantity of water on Earth, it's the access to it. So while we here in the US have a lot of access to water, other more arid environments don't. We use the water for agriculture, cooking, pretty much everything. Water is an essential part of life. So the goal here is to find better ways of using the water that we do have access to in the hopes of improving access to water across the board. So as we see here, 1 in 6 people globally do not have access to fresh, clean water. And in fact, it is estimated that the lack of water causes more deaths annually than all the wars on Earth combined. And again, this comes down to access. In the US, we have 8% of the world's population, but we have 15% of the world's freshwater supply. Whereas in Africa, we see that they have 13% of the world's population, but only 11% of the freshwater supply. So the primary means that we use to get water is groundwater, which is water that's below the earth. Groundwater systems have been in use for centuries, and even dating back to biblical times, where people would dig wells and try to pull water up from the ground. So as we study the dynamics of groundwater systems, we see, steady versus unsteady flow to a well, or uniform or non-uniform flows, flows from aquifer boundaries, and various other data. We have been able to create more efficient systems that aid in both conservation and usage of the water that we collect from groundwater. As we study this more and create better systems, we see an interesting benefit from it. The initial benefit is a return on investment. For every dollar that we spend, US dollar, we actually see between a $5 and $28 return on investment. And this is a cost savings in the future. So immediately we can see the health benefits. If people have access to clean, fresh water, they're not going to get waterborne diseases. They will be able to eat and be more healthy. They won't be dehydrated or suffer heat injuries as readily. And the biggest benefit comes at cost avoidance. If people are getting sick, they have to be treated. They have to be cared for. So the less disease that you have, which that's what fresh water can prevent, especially when it's just washing your hands, it's not just waterborne diseases. The cost avoidance really is the biggest benefit to this. So a lot of people have asked, well, what can I do? Well, we can do things here at the local level that can conserve water. And if we conserve water here locally, even in our own home, that can transmit to the communities that we live in and then in the whole world around us. For example, here in Arizona, we are depleting our groundwater. And the rivers 50 years ago used to run here in Arizona, but they don't anymore, not through the cities, because we've depleted our groundwater resources. So if we can come up with a means of collection to where we're collecting rainwater and gray water and then sanitize it, whether we're using UV radiation, boiling, or maybe we filter it through some type of activated charcoal or carbon, and then sanitize it with chlorine or some other type of chemical and store it effectively, then we can use it on an on-demand basis. And this puts less of a strain on our groundwater system, which can translate globally. If we can take what we learn here and apply it to the countries that are having a hard time collecting water and having access to water, they'll be able to collect, sanitize, and store it for later use, which would lower their diseases. So in conclusion, the benefits that we would gain from very small investments in water reclamation can greatly help the whole world around us.